There you go. So, and there was a photographer, I think it was on F-Stoppers, a Vancouver photographer that was featured. And I was going to try to find that and send that to you, but I never got around to it. Have you ever heard of any prominent Vancouver photographers? I'm sure
Oh,
there are.
yeah, there are quite a few. I think I know who you're talking about. I came across an article like that just recently, actually. Uh,
Yeah.
there's quite an active community of folks here, and then there are some folks. Amir mentioned Fred Herzog in one of his comments, and he lived in Vancouver, worked at UBC, so I've been always been very fond of his work. But
Oh yeah, Herzog for sure. Yeah. And I think that
I'll see if I
was,
can. I'll look him up. I'll see if I can find out who you.
yeah. Do you ever go to the websites like F-Stoppers or what are some of the other ones too? I frequently go to Petapixel,
Yeah.
Shutterbug.
I'm not a regular reader of them. I intersect with them. Usually, someone has spun me out through a discussion forum topic or things like that. Uh,
Yeah.
and then I dig in for a little bit if I'm interested in a particular writer or a particular topic. But I haven't been a regular to Fstopper.
Yeah. That's kind of like when I get done with my morning checking out whatever the horrible news is, I'll start checking it to go down that list to see what some of the headlines are. And some of,
Right.
I mean, lots of times you can get a lot of information, like a lot of it's very redundant, but that one little thing that comes out is very useful sometimes.
Right. Is it Greg Girard?
I think that might be it. Yeah.
I'll put a link in there because there's a recent article in Fstopper on him.
But I thought it was a great article.
Yeah, as I say, there's some really interesting chaps. A few weeks ago, it was maybe a month ago now, they were ripping down a 100-year-old building in the middle of the city, and the city had basically told the owners that they had to, have it down in a matter of a weekend because it was dangerous. And I went down to watch some of it because it was pretty dramatic. They were picking it all away very rapidly. And I met about three different photographers who I had seen doing work on Flickr and a few other places. So it was kind of a magnet for a whole bunch of people taking pictures. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah, we had an old historic smokestack, like a milk factory. One of
Right.
those big, tall brick structures in the middle of town, like a regular landmark. But they eventually had to tear. At least they cut down half of it. And I didn't know that happened. I wish I would have been there to try to,
Yeah.
yeah, like
It's
this.
pretty dramatic when you see something like that come down. Morning, John. Um, this one was such that they couldn't use explosives or anything because it was, basically built of huge wooden members and brick and everything, and it was close to too many buildings. So they just went at it with like three or four diggers and disassembled it. It was pretty dramatic. I've got a bunch of pictures in my stream on it.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that.
How are you today, John?
Fine, and you?
Just ducky, thank you.
In Holland is a better weather now. The spring is coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, here too, we've got all the summer or the spring snowdrops and some of the daffodils starting to push up. So it's quite lovely.
Yeah, we had a lot of cold weather last week, but now the sun is shining again, and well, let's hope that goes better now. Everybody is a bit sad now.
I don't like to shoot in cold weather. I mean, I still see some of the snow out here. It's got to be great to photograph, but whenever I get out with the cold, I just cannot open up. I
But
need to try to do
weather
it
is
more.
good for the photographs, huh?
Yeah. I mean, of course, I shoot so much in the warmer months. I have a whole lot of catching up to do, which is what I'm doing right now, particularly like halfway cataloging everything, culling out the stuff that I don't want anymore because I don't want to have, 5 different hard drives full of just one year.
Yeah.
So I do get some, a good practice. And when you go through, and I think it's a good practice, you do a lot more Photoshop then. So
Mhm.
that really allows you to go back and look at stuff you shot months ago, and you've got a kind of a fresh eye on it. It gives not really a fresh eye, but you've had a chance to digest it.
Hey, Teddy, going back to the photography you asked me about the Vancouver guy, I think it's this guy.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's done a lot of interesting work. He worked a bit in Hong Kong for a while.
Yeah,
He a couple really interesting books from Vancouver.
yeah, he mentioned Hong Kong in that article. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, he's worth looking at.
Do you have a collection of photo books?
I've got a haphazard one that I'm kind of slowly adding to as I discover things in used bookstores, or I just kind of go after a few folks that I want to learn more about. So yeah, how about yourself?
I do have a few. It's way behind me, but my most recent acquisition was this guy. I think I even mentioned it's being blurred. Oh, there you
Yeah,
go.
oh, modern architecture. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah.
and but I like a lot of theory about photography and stuff. You know, like Susan Sontag and
Mhm.
uh, Roland Barthes.
Yeah.
I like the concept of punctum and studium. I think
Hmm.
people need to think about that. I think that's a good foundation.
You mentioned that in one of your responses to a photo a month or two ago, I recall.
Yeah.
And me scurrying off to take a look at it.
Yeah. Punctum is really easy to figure out because that's the point of the photograph. That's the subject. That's where everybody's drawing. But the studium is like a more vague, like the environment of it or the feeling about it, the politics of it, things like that. So that's a more vague concept. But I think that could be multiple things like politics, or
Mhm.
maybe it is literally just the environment or surroundings or something that. And I used to have a really cool collect. My grandfather gave me an encyclopedia of photography back in, I think, in 1967. And it was like Encyclopedia Britannica thing, with
Oh, wow.
A to Z kind of, I think it was like 40 different volumes. These, not really thick books, but they were really interesting, but it's gone. I don't know what happened to it. I bet it's probably worth some money now, but
Yeah, books they have a way of drifting away over time.
yeah.
Sometimes they're in your house, you just haven't seen them for a while.
Yeah, but they usually don't drift away. There's usually a more accumulation, more than. And my wife is a retired college professor, so have got books everywhere. So there were some, I was kind of taking notes, not really taking notes, but paying attention to some of the comments we had this week about some of the photos, not being specific about the photos, but like the concept of straight out of the camera. That's often brought up.
Mhm.
So what would be your guys' thoughts on straight out of the camera?
It's always good to put it in your camera and not in afterwards in Photoshop. It's
Yeah,
always yeah, not better, but well, if you can do it in your camera, why not?
I sometimes have thought about this, especially and maybe simply in terms of cropping. Um, I'm happiest if I framed it appropriately with what I wanted to get when I take the shot. I'm very happy I have enough megapixels that I can crop into something that turns it into a good shot, but I wish I had done that by the time I took the shutter. So sometimes when I think about the shot out of the camera aesthetic or kind of interest is like it is a way to say, well, I haven't been doing all the remarkable things to post process that we can now do with our photos. And that's fine. So, I think that from a technique standpoint, there's a discipline to getting it right out of the camera. But I think another thing that I hear from some people is the way in which, you can do that same kind of analysis in terms of exposure. So you can or focus, right? So there are a lot of steps that you can take beyond the actual photograph where you basically fix something that wasn't caught properly at the time of exposure. But if you can back that up so that with the time you press the shutter, most of those things are kind of dialed in. I think generally that's better. And I think other times people are just doing it to provide a demonstration of the quality of their potential lens or their gear, right? So sometimes if they're reviewing a lens or
Right.
sometimes I shoot partly with an old Leica M9, and there are times when I like, they're basically shot out of the camera because I nudge two sliders in Lightroom and I'm done because the images just look really nice. And other times with other shots or other cameras, that's not the case at all. So I think those are three different ways of thinking about shot out of camera.
Yeah.
And the other, it's like that we have now the possibility to do afterwards what other people 20 years ago didn't have.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
so
yeah.
we I for myself, I think maybe 20 or 30% of the time I'm behind the computer, not making
Oh, yeah.
photographs.
You and me both.
So what's better? When in the years 70 to 80s, the people had no possibility to do it. And then it need to come out of the camera straight. And when it was wrong, then then you didn't have any photo. Or
Yeah.
Yeah,
now
I have specific ideas about straight out of the camera.
and now we have possibilities to shoot more.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, one thing good about straight out of the camera is film. You had to start watching on, oh gosh, I'm almost up to 35, 36. I got to change the roll of film. Man, we can just let it rip now.
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Mostly
do.
when I go for a photo, I come home with more than 100, but I want one photo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like that people always help to remind those who are talking about manipulation that you can really go as far back in the history of photography as you want, and manipulation has always been part of it post the shot, and in terms of darkroom techniques and dodging and burning and cropping and all of those pieces, processing the film itself. So it's not like like I think sometimes shot out of a camera is a bit of a purity test in terms of how some people put it forward. But I do like that. I think that again, over time, I think I'm getting a lot more a lot more aggressive, or I'll crop with a lot more eagerness than I used to, even maybe a couple years ago. And part of that is I have just more pixels to work with. So going from a 47 megapixel shot to a 12 megapixel shot, I still have lots of room to do what I'm typically doing, and I'm doing things more to screen than to print. So, but the constraint of getting it right in the camera, I think, is still a nice discipline, or a nice thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, to me, it's more of a try to get the exposure so I don't have to worry about if it's underexposed or overexposed or blown highlights and things like that. So I'm able to carefully craft what I'm shooting, where the light's coming in and stuff like that, so I don't have a photo that's problematic.
Yeah.
Now, to me, there's only been one true straight out of the camera process, and that is slide film. If you ever shot slides, you go through those slides and you go click at boom, there's a trash. There's one that's good. That's straight. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. That's once it's thrown up onto a projection screen, if it's too dark, if it's too bright, forget it. Everything that's true straight out of the camera. Now, if you make prints out of the slides, you have some flexibility, but slides aren't great for making prints if you want to try not blowing the highlights and things like that, because they don't have much latitude at all compared to a negative. Now, negatives, of course, it's negative. So straight out of the camera, it's negative. And and then you can also then you have to project it onto a screen, make it whatever size you want it, and you can crop by moving the easel around and so forth. So there's no straight out of the camera with negatives, but it's important to get your negative right, the right amount of density. So the old thing where you look at a newspaper, put your negative on a piece of newspaper, and you see if you can read through the various areas of where, if it's too light, you can clearly see the newsprint. If it's too dark and you can't see any of it, that's too dense. So you want to have it so you're kind of halfway between.
But they say sometimes you need to have control about your camera, so you don't make mistakes. For example, one exercise I did was with a photography course. Go for a walk 2 hours, and you only can take one picture.
Oh gosh, you don't even get a chance to warm up.
You spend a lot of time gazing at things.
And you have to think before you shoot.
Did you find your students enjoyed that activity?
No. Oh, but they won't, well, what they would like to say to you, think before you shoot.
Mm.
Now we can shoot 100 pictures and we take one out and then we edit it in Photoshop. And then we crop but is it good or not?
Well, and even with like taking multiple exposures, like for people who are kind of firing off just a whole bunch at once. I do have a DSLR where I can shoot a high frame rate, but more often than not, I'm shooting with a camera where a high frame rate is maybe 2 frames a second, 4 frames a second. But it's interesting when I go back when I go back to edit the ones where it's more 30 frames or so over a matter of a few seconds. It's a different process, like picking out the one that's just right, but in terms of like it's what I'm doing with the camera there is a little bit different, because if I'm trying to catch action and I'm only going to take 1 shot rather than 6, I have to kind of really anticipate my timing with a little bit more attention, as opposed to getting a bracketing of a bunch of photos and hope that within that I got the one that's going to be good.
I don't know how it's going when you go for a shoot or go to photograph something, but my best shoots are mostly in the end, not in the beginning.
Mm.
So you have to warm up as well.
Yeah. I think sometimes too, sometimes you're not quite in the mood, to go, but you think, I need to go out there and take this because the light is so great or something like that. So if you just put that first foot forward by getting your camera out, making sure the battery's in there, what lens, and just do the donkey stuff, and that will get you on the road. But then you just need to take that first boring shot that's not going to be any good at first, maybe, and that's when your juices will start to flow.
But actually, I'm not agree with you as well, because in a street photography, it's different. You first go in the house and you say what light we have, how I'm going to shoot today. So when you're out of the door, you know what your diaphragma and your shutter is. And then when something is happening, you shoot. You don't think, just shoot.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about mainly trying to get people, because you see, say if you feel like you're in a creative funk and you can't do it, you're not getting any inspiration. Because I think the inspiration happens once you get out there, like you're talking about. You just need to you actually need to get your camera out and go out and do it.
Yeah.
And whatever happens at that point. That's where the inspiration occurs.
I sometimes like I do a lot of forest walks around here, and sometimes I'll purposely go, like I'll walk in one direction with either a telephoto or a zoom, and then the other direction with a macro lens. And then that change of scale in terms of what I'm likely shooting also kind of throws me into like I'm looking for different kinds of things. And the same thing I find if I go out with a monochrome camera, I'm looking for very different kinds of things than if I'm shooting with a full color camera. And sometimes, people have talked before about intent and having a constraint in terms of what you're going out for. So if you're doing street photography, generally I'll go out with a wider lens. I'll probably set with zone focusing. So I'm waiting for something to come across my path, and I see something and I'll shoot. But the other side of, we've had some recent nice shots where people have been more on a bit of a fishing expedition. So they found the scene, they wait for someone to come into it. But both of those dispositions do kind of, like, again, it kind of takes a creative kind of disposition or kind of a bit of planning to get really good results.
Yeah.
And then there's the lucky shots that kind of egg you on, go, ooh, that was almost good. What could I do to make that more predictable?
Yeah. And then doing street photography. I mean, I'm kind of too shy for it, but I'm trying to branch into it. But then all of a sudden, oh, look at that building. I got to shoot this, and there's people walking around me. So it's a good thing, when all of a sudden creativity taps you on the shoulder and, oh, look at the building, or creativity tap me on the shoulder and say, look at that person standing in the doorway. and then in forest, like I've had that where, oh, I'm going to get my macro out because there's this, flower I'm going to take. And then when you get your camera all set up, a macro, get down close to the ground, and then you see this beautiful landscape. Oh man, I'm going to need to get my other lens out. But
Or carry two cameras.
that's part of the fun. What's that?
Or carry two cameras.
Yes. My one camera is heavy enough. So you mentioned monochrome camera.
Mhm.
What is a monochrome camera? I got
Oh,
an
just-
idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. So just so I've got a Leica Q2 monochrome, so it doesn't have a Bayer filter, so it's just
Okay.
yeah. So any of the most of, if not all of the black and white shots you see from me are shot with that camera. And so the benefit is with the monochrome, like all digital cameras have a monochrome sensor, but then they put a filter in front in order to give the color through was it RGGB, so you get two green photo sites, a red and a blue, but that knocks the resolution back just a little bit, and you have a bit lower dynamic range. So with a monochrome sensor, like if you do astrophotography or things like that, those are typically done with monochrome, and then you apply a filter to get the wavelengths you want for certain kinds of imaging. But it gives you just got a different latitude. It's almost like if you put black and white film in a camera, you have a different range of things that will maybe work really well with that, and maybe other things not so much. But it's nice to have that constraint sometime. And I think it works equally well in many respects in terms of just shooting, to set your camera so the view screen is monochrome and all the results you look at are monochrome. But with those files, you can flip them back to color anytime you want. With a monochrome camera, you can't. It's just black and white.
And the monochrome files, are they raw files?
Yeah.
But actually, it's a different shot, different different development as a RGB.
There is no RGB, so you just have luminance channel, and that's it. So you've got 256 values of gray.
There we have Fernando.
Hello there.
Hey, there he
Hello,
is.
everybody.
I was wondering when you're going to finally show up one of these days.
I'm glad I was able to join this time, and I'm sorry I'm joining. It took me a few meetings to join, but
you're
I
here.
really appreciate the effort, and I'm very enthusiastic about. That's why we do what we do in weekly, and just to connect people and to promote photography and share different ways of doing what we're doing and learn from each other. So the more the merrier.
Man, it's good to get a face on an actual live human being, and then I think gives you a better perspective with what everybody's saying.
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
Where are you from, Fernando?
Sorry,
Where are you from?
I am originally from Argentina.
Argentina. Okay.
Yes, and I moved to Hawaii in 2001.
So we can talk Spanish.
Hablo español.
Muy bien. My wife is from Cuba, so
Muy bien. Very good. Very good. Yes, I used to speak a little German, but I forgot out of practice. I can understand a little bit if they speak slowly. I can make sense of what I don't understand, but I don't remember. I cannot articulate a whole conversation anymore.
So you're in Hawaii now?
I'm in Hawaii. I'm in Maui, the island of Maui. Yes.
I visited Hawaii a few years ago, and it was a great trip, but it turns out that my skin is way too sensitive to that direct sunlight.
The sun, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I was starting to get welts and a rash.
Yeah.
So, and we were scheduled to go to Galapagos the year after that, so we had to
Right.
we canceled that and ended up going to the Arctic instead. But it was Hawaii is absolutely beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's an archipelago. There's 4 main islands, and they're all different. The geography, the what you see is different. The landscape,
Mhm.
the forests are kind of different. In extreme cases, each island has its volcano, and the only active volcanoes are on the big island of Hawaii. And there's this plant, for example, that only grows at the top of the crater of the volcano in Maui, the Haleakala. It's called the silver sword. It is unique from there. You don't see it
Hmm.
anywhere else in the world and anywhere else in the universe. And there is a very similar one that grows in the Big Island in Mauna Kea, but it is a different variety of the species. They're not the
Hmm.
same.
So you're
And
talking about the
so,
plant that looks like it's silver, right?
yeah, it is
Yeah.
like it's silvery, thin leaves. They form like a
Yeah.
ball, and I don't know if it takes like 10 years to shoot a stem that produces flowers. It's like a candy cane, beautiful,
Hmm.
and then they die.
Yeah, I
It's
saw
like
those. Yeah, kind of
they bloom
astounding.
only once in their life and then they die. It's very beautiful.
You also have such beautiful dark skies in Hawaii. I
And
went
the
a few
skies, of
years
course.
ago, and I'm quite interested in astronomy, and so just looking at the dark skies is so beautiful there.
It is amazing, and I never really tried uh, to photograph the stars. Never learned how to. To me, it was all about telescopes, and
Hmm.
it take a lot of time. So I said I'm not going to get into that. And years ago, after joining a local camera club, uh, some of these photographers here showed me how to photograph. And I had everything. I had the camera, the lenses. I just needed to learn how to do it. And once you photograph the Milky Way on a long exposure, 30 seconds, it's just unreal because
Yeah.
the camera captures what the eye cannot see. And in a long exposure, much more. So it's pretty much on the sky. There's no black empty patch. No
Nope.
matter where you're looking at, there's stars or galaxies. It's like we grow up believing that the sky is all this black empty thing, the universe. It is the opposite. It is pretty much solid if you want. It's just going through sand. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And more now we have all these the James Webb telescope and the Hubble before. I mean, the images they produce, it's just stunning. Stunning.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting, the Andromeda galaxy, if you actually see the entire galaxy, it's wider than the moon. So you
Oh
Right.
yeah.
more prominent than the moon practically in the sky. But
Yeah.
you don't, if the only thing you can see by the naked eye is just that little
You
core
can
antenna.
see it here with the naked eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You used to
And
in
if you're
Indiana, but now we have too much light pollution.
And typically, when you have Andromeda in the view of an eyepiece of a telescope, you're seeing at least three galaxies all clustered together, and you can Andromeda is bright enough that you can sometimes see star clusters in some of the arms of it. So yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. It's and what's more amazing is everything we're going to find out in the future, right? Everything
Oh
Hmm.
these new
yeah.
technologies are going to be able to show us, and it's a very interesting time to live in. I often think when I was 12, 14, 18, I I was devouring all these classic sci-fi books and Asimov and Ray Bradbury and all these guys. They imagine all this technology that they placed like 200, 300, 5,000 years in the future, and it all happened in 50, 70 years.
Yeah.
And we're living it right now. It's like
Hmm.
everything we read as a kid, it's real, it's tangible, it's happening right now in front of us. And I think that is amazing.
You mentioned you are on Maui, is that correct?
I'm on Maui, yes.
Were you impacted at all by the recent fire?
Yes, I mean, not directly, almost. So the there was many fires, not just one.
Yeah.
There was this big wind storm, and it dropped some electric lines, and people were not savvy to turn off the power at the electric company, and so the sparks ignited different fires, and then the wind was so strong that it pushed the fires faster than they could control it, and it traveled down on the west side towards Lahaina town, and it was like LA recently, it's just unstoppable. It destroyed everything. But what was more dramatic in Lahaina is that nobody was really. It was a new thing that nobody ever imagined. Nobody was really prepared to deal with it. So the police they blocked the roads because of the smoke. There was no visibility. So they said, well, we need to block traffic to avoid accidents, to prevent accidents. Just send everybody home. Just stay home. Wait for the for the firemen to control the fire. But people were trying to escape, and they couldn't leave the town because the roads were blocked by the police, and they
I
had
think
to
we're going to
abandon.
the ocean, and
They had to abandon their cars and run for their lives, and some found refuge jumping in the ocean, and some had to stay in the water for long periods of time. I don't know if half an hour or 1 hour.
Hmm.
Some drowned. The heat was so extreme that it melted everything metal. The cars melted down. You can see the kind of the skeleton of the burnt car and molten metal running over the concrete. We had one of these submarine companies for tourists. It's like a little mini submarine for, I don't know, 20 people, maybe 30 people, that they use to transport the crews to the oil platforms. That's where they come from, and they started their own company just to take people around underwater, and that is floating on the surface, but is away from the shore. And so you say, well, all those boats and ships that are in the water, they should not be affected by the fire. No, they just burned and melted down. This is just fire, like plastic and fiber. It was all like a toy, like a molten toy.
wow.
And where I live up in the mountain and on the side of the crater. And I am surrounded by forests and trees. And some of those fires got into the forest, and when they get inside of a gulch, the gulch is full of debris, fallen trees and branches, and everything is dry, and it's all, fuel for the fire. So and at the same time, the firemen, they cannot go in. They don't have the equipment to get inside. They can dump water from the top with helicopters, which they were doing constantly. But the canopy of the other trees doesn't block the water from getting down into the gulch. It's very difficult to stop. And I had the fires less than a mile away from my house.
Oh my gosh.
At midnight. The winds were tumbling down trees. There was crazy winds, and I was out driving around, measuring the distance to the fires and trying to decide whether should I go, should I stay home. And I had already loaded my truck and my trailer with all the valuables and taken down to another place because I thought that we were going to lose everything. Fortunately, it didn't progress, so I was all right. But those flames, if you can visualize the tallest eucalyptus trees that you can remember, they were twice as tall. And it was just a wall of fire engulfing the whole eucalyptus forest coming towards you. And
Did you have trouble breathing?
not breathing. The smell was strong, and And what happened is that it did burn some neighborhoods, and construction here is all wood basically, and a lot of the buildings, there's been remodels and improvements, but essentially a lot of them come from the 50s and the 60s, so it's very old. And so then all that paint that burns and all the chemicals you have on your house, cleaning supplies, paint, gas, uh, all of that burns into the ashes, and so burns also the piping of the potable water system. So then it contaminates the potable water. And then all the areas nearby that are in the same network of the water system, maybe they were not affected by the fire, but now nobody else has potable water for a while until they figure out how to decontaminate. And those contaminants, I didn't know anything about this. The lines have bends, and sometimes they have some T connections and sharp elbows. And in those sharp elbows is where the contaminants accumulate. And they're difficult to flush. They need to flush a lot of water to push them away and out of the net. And it takes a lot of water and a lot of time. Water here is a limited resource, and we don't have big rivers, and it's all rainwater collected. We have some streams, and it's all collected into reservoirs. And the fear was that now the contaminants got into the reservoir, and fortunately it didn't. So it was a little. I don't complain. We were fine. We were not affected. Our health, we were healthy. We were fine. We didn't suffer any loss. A little wind damage in the property. I have 2 acres, and it took down a few trees and destroyed a few plants. Nothing that will not grow back again. But some people lost everything, and a lot of people died. I have friends who lost absolutely everything. I mean, they had to grab their babies and run away. They lost all their money, all their possessions, all their birth certificate, document, absolutely everything, and they had to start over. And when you have to do that at 18 or 20, it's an adventure. When you have to do that at 40, it's dramatic. And at 60, it's you don't have the energy sometimes. It's difficult.
Did it affect the wildlife much?
No, well, it causes stress. We don't have a lot of wildlife per se. There's birds, and they just run away. The wildlife, it always moves away. We have a lot of deer, but it is not native from here, and it grows out of control. So in that regard, a lot of people enjoy that. It's a reduction in the population of the deer because they they jump into the gardens and eat their plants. Right. To me, I come from the big city. I mean, when deer come into my house, I celebrate. They can eat everything. My wife says sometimes, "Oh, they're gonna eat all the fruit trees and all the fruits and the flowers." I say, "Great, that's why we have fruits. I can buy my fruits at the supermarket. These fruit are for the deer and the pig and the birds, and let them come." I take pictures of them, and it's a peaceful place to live. We were really blessed in that regard.
But one thing I noticed there with the wild goats.
There's wild goats, yeah.
It was like I was on a bus tour, and I wish we would have just stopped because I saw these goats on volcanic rocks. They look like elk, these proud creatures posing on these rocks.
Well, that's where they thrive. That is the terrain that goats naturally are made for that. You know, they like to climb, they can jump from one place to, they can go very fast on very difficult terrain. And so they're safe there. And but we don't have mountain lions, we don't have any big predators, we don't have snakes, we don't have poison
Yeah.
snakes.
Now, you do have trouble with feral hogs, don't you? Feral pigs?
There are some, but we don't have trouble. I don't have trouble with anything, you know. And another house I used to live before this one, also in a very kind of remote area. They used to, so they formed their, I don't know the name, the families, let's say, the groups, and they travel together with the deer.
Hmm.
So you have maybe 20, 25 deer eating from the trees, and right behind you have like 20, 25 pig, like start digging in the grass and nibbling for worms and all the stuff that they eat. And they make a mess of the grass, you know, they just, you wake up one morning and you see like, okay, what happened there? Like a bulldozer ran over your property. But what's the big deal? You know, you just clean up a little bit and everything grows back right away. I always say by the time I finish mowing my grass, it started growing again on the other end of the property.
Now, one of the things we were talking about before you joined in was just the concept of straight out of the camera.
Okay.
I had, if what would be your take on straight out of the camera?
Well, you made a commentary in Weekly that I'm curious about your logic there because I don't know that much. You said that the only, if I got it right, you said something like the only straight out of the camera is Ektachrome film,
Well, slide film.
slide film.
Yeah.
And I'm curious why would you say that? Because in my understanding, and I deal with computers technology, that is kind of, I'm not a software engineer or a coder, but I put them together and I fix them, and that's kind of what I do. So I see everything as a process, and digital cameras is a software that automates with certain logic applied to the development of a raw file, and it turns it into an image automatically. But so does film, all sorts of film. Film is a chemistry that causes a reaction, and it automates the process of producing an image from what was recorded. So straight out of camera is the same thing in the end. So you can leave it to the film to give you an image, or you can leave it to the software to give you an image. Whether you like it or not is a different story. What it is done to in a way that is pleasant to us, maybe the chemistry in Ektachrome will produce an image that we love, and then we don't feel that we need to tweak it anymore. When a JPEG from a Nikon or a Canon or a Leica is something that, well, we're not quite happy with it yet, and we feel that we need to do something else. But some people do like it, and everything is straight out of the camera. And actually, a good example would be I submitted this infrared photograph this week, and
Good shot too.
and thank you. And you were curious to say, I wonder how it looks straight out of the camera. So I show you that deep red image, and that is untouched. That is the raw. That is basically a JPEG from the raw file as it comes from the camera. I didn't do anything to it. And some people loved it. They said, well, you know, that is awesome. Why didn't you submit that version? And it would never cross my mind that something so red and so blunt would be aesthetically pleasant for some people. I like it to a point, but it wouldn't be my choice, right? Or my preference. So the straight out of the camera, that is also straight out of the camera. And so it depends on the subject. It is very subjective, uh, what people will like or not, and when is enough. Some people need to push an image all the way into HDR, crazy, grungy uh, representations, and others will go for the black and white when others will go for strong color versions.
Yeah, my point straight out of the camera with slides is when you get this piece of film and you get it properly exposed, and then you pop it into a slide projector, and that's what you see. That's like right out, that's the piece of film that you're looking at. Whereas a negative or in a digital image, it has to be manipulated in some manner or another. I'm not saying anything wrong with that, of course, but I think there has to be some manipulation involved with anything that's not a slide or something captured in that manner.
But the chemistry developing the slide is
Yeah.
manipulating the film.
Well, you can. I've done a lot of slide processing, and generally the only thing you can really do, particularly with color, is you can post process. You can leave it in developer longer to achieve higher
Right.
ISOs, what they called ASAs. But with color, there's almost nothing you can do with the chemistry that isn't going to make it look unrealistic. I mean, some people will leave it in the developer longer to get a special kind of effect.
Right.
But if you're
Right.
trying to get like a picture of a sunset or a blue sky with white clouds and green forest or something like that, that's what the film is designed for. It's sensitometry, where they have all the densities and the amount of time and developer and so forth, the bleach and the fixture and all that. That's designed to be like kind of a truth. And when you pop that, then you have that, you pop it into a slide. Oh, this looks gorgeous. And if you've ever shot slide film, especially when there's no such thing as digital monitors, it's great to see your photos pictured like that on a big screen.
Of course.
And
But if you photograph a JPEG with your Z9, you pick a landscape, sunset, same scene with your Z9, and you photograph it, and then you get the JPEG from the camera, and you publish it without touching it. You do nothing to it.
well, if you're lucky, if you can. If the lighting is all just right,
Right. So
yeah,
it's the
you can
same
get
thing.
away with that.
Right exposure. You just perfect the capture in camera, do your best, and then you have it right on camera. You get the scene recorded in a different media. So it's film versus digital. But the only and you commit to the same. It's okay. I'm not going to do any processing to this. I will just
Actually,
grab the
you
JPEG.
are working like a photographer in the early days, because they didn't have digital.
Right.
I was this week. I was in an exhibition from Saul Leiter.
Mm.
You know him.
Mhm.
But, he specialized in film, but film have a consuming date, and he only bought film when they were over the date. And then
Expired, right?
Expired. Yes.
and then he became famous for that kind of film.
Well, and his shots are so like the colors are just so
Yeah.
lush and rich and also like his background was with commercial and advertising photography, fashion photography, things like that, and then he got into all kinds of things, including street. But that visual sensibility of his is really notable, especially through color. It's really remarkable stuff. I've been diving into a book of his I bought not so long ago, and I love his work. It's really something. I wonder if some of the shot out of the camera stuff, I mean, I said earlier, it's almost, for some folks, I think it's a purity test. And, like, this is right out of my camera. I haven't manipulated it in any crazy way. And some of that might speak to post-processing and all the things we can do to digitally process our photos now. But I think another part is there are a lot of folks who, and nothing wrong with this, but I think a creative pathway for a lot of folks is to apply a filter, and a filter that's provided by a camera. And so
Right.
when people are kind of tweaking, they're let's say generating JPEGs out of the camera, and they've added a certain, I don't know, like an Arcos, the Fuji Blacks. I think I've got the name wrong. But
Across the Fuji
yeah,
across.
so, when people are applying a certain filter or effect in camera in order to sometimes reproduce, kind of a slide-like aesthetic and such, some people, I think, are trying to move in another direction to say, okay, this is not any of that. But then I think other folks are striving to produce images through their exposure, through, how they're setting things on their camera to do something that's quite remarkable that other people would need to post-process or otherwise manipulate. So again, I think it does come back to for different folks. Some people want their shots to look very different, or they want to strip them back for a particular reason, or in some cases they just want to draw attention to a lens or a sensor or a film combination. I'm also intrigued by like I can remember when, as digital came into the scene, for years having arguments with a few friends about, I've got the best digital sensor I have is my scanner and, scanning my film. And then over time, of course, the sensors gained in resolution and dynamic range to the point that they're where the game is now in many respects, if that's what you want. But we have, and even in the comments within Weekly, people are looking at film differently, nostalgically, kind of trying to think about, well, do I like the film grain or is it too grainy? And like aesthetically are kind of my response, and I think others' responses to the medium of film or analog to digital and even JPEGs or DNG files. Those are all at play in terms of how people are kind of responding to images. And then it was interesting recently, there were some comments about, well, is Flickr now starting to mess with more compression on the images now? So, we're starting to get a degradation of the quality of what we see. And that's problematic in other platforms, of course. So I think all of these things are in play a bit when we think about how people respond to just what's the image out of the camera.
Right.
Yeah, well, one thing, one of the differences between film and digital is, particularly once you get into larger megapixels, once you get it past 20 megapixels on a raw image, there's a lot more information in that file than there ever was with film. So you're going to have a lot of shadow details in particular. So if you get this beautiful scene, like I was talking about with the slides of the blue sky and the white clouds and the green, when you get a raw image of that, it's going to look kind of flat and muddy. So straight out of the camera with that wouldn't be true to the original scene. That's why you have to tweak the shadows and the highlights and so forth to make that true to the scene. And that's great. I think that's wonderful that can happen. There's unfortunately there's not enough. They don't really have a lot of information in the highlights. It'd be cool if they could with the digital files, because that's why it's so easy to blow the highlights out.
Yeah.
Probably some exponential logarithmic scale about why that is, but the ability to open up those shadows is like incredible compared to what film was. But so straight out of the camera can be okay, but if you might have a perfect image, but if you're going to say, well, this is a muddy image, so I'm not going to display it, that's the mistake. You need to actually carve out those shadows and adjust the balance between the highlights and the shadows to make that picture work. And that's of course, that's subject to interpretation.
I have and not to disagree, but maybe to challenge a little bit of the extent of that statement. I went full circle. So in my 20s, I shot film, but never seriously. I had my SLR and I was doing my travel photos with the SLR. I would care more about composition and getting it something that looked decent. But then I would send the film to the lab and get my prints, and that was it. That was the end of it. The and I always love photography to explore something to engage seriously, but I could never afford it. I never had a budget to buy film in bulk and start shooting in quantities. And until I came to Hawaii, and here in Hawaii, it coincided that 2002 is when the first little pocket-sized digital cameras came up that were affordable. And then for about $700, I was able to buy a little Olympus with an underwater housing, and I was here to dive. And I was like, cool, I'm not only doing photography, I'm doing underwater photography.
Mm.
And that's when I started. Initially, all these digital cameras, they were not giving us a raw file. They were all only giving us a JPEG or a TIFF. And the software in the camera was processing the image for us. There was no, it was straight out of camera. There was nothing we could do. And they were trying to do their own version of what film was doing, every manufacturer. And then Adobe came up strong with Lightroom and all these. They said, hey, give us the raw, give us the raw. And vendor said, no, we're not going to give you, it's proprietary. So then they started to reverse engineer and build these tables to decode the raw. And when you process an icon raw file in the different raw processors, you're going to get different results. Even before you move any slider, just by opening the raw file, what the software is, the way the software is interpreting the information is different, because they do their own reverse engineering. They don't get anything from the manufacturer. Anyways, so I got into my journey through photography was digital photography. Then I started teaching myself Photoshop and all, how to. Of course, I wanted the raw files. I wanted that detail. I wanted all that ability to get better images. Eventually, I even sold some images, and I bought my more expensive gear and even underwater equipment. And then I got tired. At some point, I had enough. It's like I don't have the will, the energy to spend hours in front of my computer going through 200 raw files anymore. I just don't want to do that. And it was frustrating because, like, I love doing this, but it's like it's over. So I started thinking back of film, because it was also, it was maybe 10 years ago when people started to go back into film. And I said, well, maybe I should go back into film. But there was no more labs here in Maui to process the film. So I had to learn how to do it myself. And that involves dealing with all the chemistry, and I didn't want to do that either. So anyways, fortunately, there was a class, and I go and take the class. So I get a film camera after many, many years with a roll of black and white film, and I go shoot. And I don't know what I'm doing. And so I take a few photos, and we were going to develop them in the lab. And I processed my first roll of black and white film. And of course, I probably did something wrong, and like I didn't spin the tank enough. I don't know. I had an image on the first 3/4 of the image. There was an image, but the bottom was blown up on the negative, so it was completely black. There was literally no information, but it was a beautiful image. So I scanned it, and it came up. I had the beautiful scene of the bamboo forest and all this black stripe on the bottom. And I said, okay, let's see how much detail I can recover from the blacks. And I will show you the image, and you won't believe it. I don't think I would be able to recover so much detail from a digital capture. And everything was there. You cannot tell that that was uh, underexposed. You cannot tell. There is no noise. There is no loss of detail. It's just the same characteristic of that film in terms of grain or sharpness. Everything continues smoothly. And so, and a similar experience I had with when photographing a sunset. The transitions into the sun, the full white, it is much smoother in film. The gradients are progressively smoother, and they remain smooth. When in digital, you have a gradient until you have a sharp cutoff into a flat overexposure. And you can see in modern images, you can see blown up areas. You're going to see a hard edge into the blown up, and with no more information. So I guess it depends on the film. I understand some films are only like 5 stops of range, and others give you like 12 or 13. But I was really impressed. So I don't know how they compare really, and I don't know how much information is available in one or the other. It will probably depend on the camera you're using and the sensors you're using. Some give you more than others. But anyways, that I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, a really interesting point there. Like, again, there is a, the analog curve is not quantized. So when you digitize it, there has to be a cutoff just in terms of the value. Though over time, when you have more like higher and higher megapixel counts, you maybe it's probably beyond the point of perception for really, really
Right.
high megapixels. But like I think of some of the images that Wolfman has shared recently, where it's the silver halide and it's the emulsion effects that are there that are they're baked into the image and then digitized. But that initial effect is something that, going back to shot out of the camera, people are applying a filter to make it look like a film effect.
That right.
And that, or applying, Teddy, I know you're pretty exacting in terms of noise in images, and then of course people are applying filters to put noise back in because a lot of photos are unnaturally smooth aesthetically in terms of maybe what some people like to see in terms of texture. And you see the same thing with cinematography, where people are starting to shoot on film again in order to try to create just a different surface for the image that in its difference, I suppose, has a certain artistic or some kind of value that people are attracted to. So, but it is fascinating to kind of see, like, we're really in a rich time for, well, curiously, at the same time as film is becoming, increasingly expensive and inconvenient, it's become very attractive to a lot of people to shoot with. I'm trying to shoot a little bit more with film, but I think, as I said last week, I'll shoot a roll and then I don't develop it for a long time. I just can't seem to get that part of it. And I should teach myself how to develop my own black and white film, but I haven't yet, though I did that way back in high school days. But I do appreciate the fact that people are putting something forward that they're intentionally shooting with film, with all of the things that brings in terms of a difference in contrast, exposure, all of the things that they have to accommodate. And it's quite lovely to see that even with the expired film that we see people kind of actively seeking out now. It's kind of a fun and I think can be a very creative way to choose the tools that you bring to the photographs you want to make.
Yeah, a lot of people are using expired Kodachrome film, and you just process it in D76
Right.
and get black and white images.
Right.
Because Kodachrome is basically black and white film.
And quite frankly, there's I think that the younger generation photographers in their 20s, early 30s, that they were born into the digital age, they were born into this technology. They're not really concerned about they adopt film freely. It's like you give them a film that gives purple images, and they're like, "Cool, that looks awesome."
Right.
They don't they don't have that reference, historical references. Okay, whatever I do with this film needs to look similar or better of how film used to look 50 years ago. They don't even care. It doesn't even cross their mind. So it is a very free exploration that they're doing. And I think you get to see, I don't like everything I see, but you get to see really incredible stuff. I'm particularly interested in standing development because I don't have the time to, and I'm not a chemist. I don't really want to have to learn all the different developers and timetables, and I don't want to get into all of that, burning and dodge it. I have an enlarger at home. I have everything. I just don't have the time to use it, or I don't have the interest. It's like, okay, do I really want to get into all of that? No. And
A
so
lot of fun, but it's a lot of work.
it's a lot of work.
Work.
But I have appreciation for the aesthetics that this black and white film has given me. I like the Velvia, the Fuji Velvia slide. I like the colors it gives me, and at some point I'm still hoping to open up some. I haven't been participating in weekly for a few years because I've been so busy. Now I'm finally able to be back more. I hope I can stay, and but at some point I would like to have some time at least for stand development, and because that makes it really really easy, and it has an effect of the transitions in the highlights into the shadows that they call halation, that it works very very well in certain things. I really like it, and so that could be an answer for me.
So you're planning on doing some film development?
Oh yeah.
Okay, one of the things I've done a lot of film developing. And one thing that a lot of people, when they start off, they use tap water or soft water to mix your chemicals. Always use distilled water
Okay.
because that's because you're literally going to ruin your images otherwise. So just an FYI, that's was one
Okay.
of the most common mistakes when I was actually helping people learn how to do darkening work back in the 70s. Don't do tap water. And especially don't use soft water.
Okay, I'll keep that in
And
mind.
you're probably using plastic reels, aren't you? Like
No, yes.
stainless steel?
So yeah, I think I have a metal one. But again, um, I have an old. What is the name of this? I can't remember now the brand name of these tanks that.
Unicolor?
No, they're black with the red leads.
No, I got black ones, unicolor ones. They didn't have a red lid, but I know what you're talking
the,
about. Drums.
but anyways, it's a tank,
Yeah.
and you can. It's a day tank, a daylight tank. So you can feed the roll inside the development tank, and then you can pour the liquids on daylight. You don't need a dark room for that. And
Oh, that's interesting.
and then there is a new company in Italy that they came up with a similar daylight development tank for 35 and medium format. And I bought it from them a few years ago. I have it. And but they keep coming up with new things for $700 or $800. You can buy an electronic development unit that you just put the roll of film and the bottles with chemicals and press a button, and it will just do the color development for you. It just warms up the chemicals to temperature, and it keeps track of the timing, and it feeds one chemical, and it cleans it up, and then it feeds the other one. It's all automated, and they're not that expensive these days. The and they're not that large. It's something more manageable. So at some point, I'm hoping that I'm gonna get on it. the more I photograph, the more I'm interested in not the traditional photograph. Anybody can go today and photograph a sunset, and they come up with an incredible image. More about the trying to add this is why I play a lot with flares and with I find myself adding a grain emulation to a lot of my images, and it's not something that I did in the past. It's something that I'm starting to do right now because I get some emotional response to that when I look at the image, and that the crisp, clean digital version of the image doesn't give me anymore. And I'm more interested of that. I have met here in Maui, there's a lot of artists of all sorts. It's kind of a place where artists converge to do their thing. And I have met some artists that they don't share what they do. They just devote their lives like a monk to explore something, and they don't show it. And they have this attic full of stuff that they created that is wonderful and incredible in some ways. And they don't share it. They don't show it. This guy, for example, he buys expired film, but he also kind of wraps it into a plastic with some wet rag or something and buries it underground for 3 years before he exposes it. And he's doing stuff like that. That is completely ridiculous. And he
Fermented
doesn't
film.
know, right? He doesn't know if maybe he's ruining the thing completely, but maybe he gets all these weird colors that wouldn't be possible otherwise. And he embraces what he gets. It's like, oh, that looks cool. That's great. That is cool. And he doesn't try to fix it or anything. And so there's a lot of freedom in that, and that I wouldn't normally allow myself to do it because of my structures of things. Oh, that is wrong for this. That is wrong for that. No, just allow and see what happens. And that is kind of what I'm more interested these days.
Well, there's so many things people can do with photography. I mean, it's hard for somebody like me to talk to somebody who's doing something more on that artistic end of it. I mean, but that doesn't mean one is better than the other. I mean,
No.
I kind of stick with and that's why oftentimes I'll abstain from from an image, even though maybe this image is really good, because I just don't have the vocabulary or really anything with this to like, make that a positive review. So I'll just leave it alone. It's not, I feel bad about that sometimes, but I just don't have that knowledge, that expertise. Well, I do think I have expertise, particularly with beginner photographers who might be having problems with, over processing, for example. And of course, some people use over processing for artistic effect, but for a lot of beginners, over processing is just something they need to learn not to do. And that's what I try to help them say, here, this was good here, but you might try pulling back those sliders a bit or so forth.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like in the last while, we've had some amazing macro photos presented by various folks in the group, and one thing that I've been really admiring is, I mean, both there's the technical chops associated with that. Is some folks are stacking like yourself, Teddy, and other techniques that are quite precise, quite advanced, but we've had some recent ones like the spiders last week that were there, or not, sorry, spiders, the bees, but that crossover into that kind of artistic and aesthetic look, like you've got this beautifully executed image with such sharp detail, but you've got almost like a Renaissance scene of the bees tumbling together. Or I remember one of your flower shots where the way you were playing against the curve of the leaf in relation to the flower was extremely artistic and technically precise. And so I love to see that people are doing a lot of crossover effects in terms of what they're trying to do, both in terms of knowing how to use their equipment and have intention driving the results they're getting, but also like I think someone can be both very technically proficient and artistic. But even if something isn't outwardly artistic, and and what does that mean to say something is outwardly artistic? Does it mean that the colors are brighter, or something's a bit surreal? Like it's really up to the observer. But I think people who have some vision or sense of what they're creating as the whole, there's so much latitude, and you can kind of bring something fascinating and arresting visually out of the most mundane object, or the most majestic view of a vista, from the top of a mountain. That's pretty fantastic that can happen. I love people who can take a shadow of a cup on a sidewalk and turn it into art. That's just so cool.
right.
And sometimes it's proficient, and there's an eye that is seeing that. So the combination of those two things can go either in a more technical or artistic direction.
Yeah. Now, another aspect of that is it's great that people can express themselves artistically in any way they want. But I think there is a problem when you get into the world of photography, and if you're going to Google things like great photographs, like the best photographs of 2024 or something like that, best macro photographs, best wildlife photographs, you're kind of stuck in this. You're in a very much more technical realm. You usually don't see a lot of that. You almost never see things like when you have in these lists of great photographs, for example, you're trying to emulate an expired film or scratches on film or something like that. So I think that's kind of a handicap for people entering the world of greater photography on the web, because that's not represented that well. And I'm wondering if there's another way to word that so you could find that kind of art, like photos / something, and you would say, oh yeah, there's a whole world there where people will be able to find that kind of communication with one another. Like we were talking about f-stoppers and petapixel and shutters. And if you go to those things, you never see stuff like that. Like they're not talking about these very, very artistic methods. So.
I learned by myself because I never had the possibility to go to school of photography, or to get tutoring, or to work as an assistant for a professional. I wanted to do it. I would go to Borders. It's a bookstore here in.
Now we know Borders. Yeah, no
Yeah,
more Borders.
no more. But for the folks in Europe, it's a big bookstore, and
Yep.
it has a coffee shop. And I would go to the photography section, and there is basically two sections. One is for art, photography as art, and so you can get books of Ansel Adams and all the big photographers, all the big names. Or you could go to the section of digital photography and Photoshop and how to process the photos on your computer. And I would grab 4 or 5 books and sit for coffee and just spend a couple hours reading and taking notes. And maybe I would buy a book and bring it home. The internet has become a monster of, well, there is some information and a tremendous amount of misinformation. And at the end of the day, it's an algorithm that gives you results based on a formula coded by somebody, according to somebody's choices. So I don't know that the internet is a good reference for knowledge, unless you know enough to clean what you get and select precisely and keep searching until you narrow it down and you find what you're looking for.
That's a trick I was talking about too, because
Right.
generally, say you go to Time Magazine's great photographs of 2024, for example,
Right.
that's not usually going to be misinformation or popular photography best
Right.
things like that.
Right. A lot of those publications, I found that they were highly commercial. And here in Maui, we have so Adobe and Canon, for example, work together, and they
Celebration.
What is this?
Oh well.
Nice catwalk.
Magical?
An in-camera
Adobe-
effect. Look at that.
Adobe and Canon, and they do a great job here because it's they put together these master classes, and they go to places. One of their ambassadors go to places to showcase their photography, their equipment, and sometimes they bring printers and they show how to print images and all of that. And all of that is wonderful, but what they're doing is they're promoting their brand. They're promoting their equipment and their brand, and in a way they're also telling you, come with us, don't go with the others because we're better and the others are not.
Give me your money.
Right. And and I particularly don't like when people are trying to put me in a box in a way. I don't like that. It's like there's a second motivation behind the what they're offering. But there are educational places to go. One that I support completely is Lenswork Publishing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And what these people have done is, and he started as the publisher. I can remember his name now. He started like one of us, sharing what he loves to do, his experience through photography, and but he said, I'm going to do something about the experience of photography. It's not going to be technical. It's not going to be about cameras. It's not going to be about films. There's a lot of that over there. Let's talk about making images, the motivation, the artistic side, the inspiration. Let's talk about what nobody else is talking. And he's been doing that now for, I don't know, 20, 30 years or more. And he started with the magazine, and then he expanded into PDF files, and then he expanded into workshops and videos and a whole website. And there's more information there. It's like going to school of photography. There's more there that you have time to review. It's amazing. I've learned so much from him.
Mhm.
And there is another guy in Texas that started a website, The Art of Photography, and
Oh, yeah. I know who. Yeah.
he does. We should be sharing all this information on weekly on a post. The
Not,
and it's wonderful. He used to be the curator for a museum in Texas, and with the growth of YouTube, when he started posting stuff on YouTube, he started to have an audience, and he saw a lot of people interested in what he was saying. He would show how to process the black and white film or how to use a camera, but then he expanded, and now he's interviewing photographers. He's talking kind of similar to what Lenswork is doing, but different. And very good, very valuable.
We started off. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I was going to say
No.
we started off our conversation today talking about photo books and things, and I think your comments about the internet and the listicle articles, best pictures of aren't terribly helpful, though they're often entertaining. But one
Right.
thing I've found myself enjoying more about photo books, and to a certain extent, even certain people I follow on Flickr and such, is like when you start to see people's work within a body of work. So, I some years ago I bought a Vivian Maier book, and I
Right.
just became enchanted with trying to understand, the story itself in terms of how her body of work was discovered and kind of retrieved from the trash is itself fascinating. But when you kind of see the work of a photographer over many years, and even the books that they've put themselves into collections as well as just retrospectives of their work over the year, that drops you down into kind of a different way of thinking about what the photographer is doing than just seeing, well, here's a nice image, here's another nice image, or you start to kind of see, well, hopefully I aspire to start to see, how do they see try to understand
Correct.
what is it that gave them the impulse to take that picture in this way. How can I develop more sensibility to seeing through eyes like that in the world that I walk, which is different than theirs. But seeing bodies of work to me just adds a whole level of value and interest and possibility than just seeing, wow, that's a nice picture. Or
Correct.
the people who are asking for critique of a single work sometimes, like it's been beneficial in the year that I've been hanging out with all of you folks. I recognize the way you take pictures of more than I did when I first started. And so part of the interesting part of the on-ramp to weekly was figuring out, okay, wow, what is that? Like trying to locate some of you in terms of the genre of your photography, and then trying, there are some that I have maybe more to offer to as way of response than others, but it's been nice to see how individuals in the group photograph the world they see. That's as meaningful as a particular image that's out of context. Maybe more valuable.
There is in the journey what photographers, seasoned photographers say that the journey of as a photographer is you start first, this first stage where you just learn the craft. You just master the camera technique, the processing in the computer. You learn the tools that you're going to be using. So everything you produce in those days, maybe spectacular or not, but it's all part of that mastering the craft. Then you start making images, which is standalone single images of one or another thing, and you may get good results there also. The next step is just focusing, limiting yourself to something very, very specific and ruling out the rest and producing series of work, which is what you're talking about. So it's a collection of images about a subject or a topic or an exploration or a feeling that you're trying to document or to express, and sometimes you will choose to do this. This is going to be done on Ektachrome film with a 50 millimeter lens. That's it, and that's all you have. Or it could be a cell phone with Hipstamatic, and I have seen bodies of work like that are really terrific. And years ago, a good friend of mine, he went to Central America with his cell phone and a Hipstamatic app, and it was, but maybe 10 megapixels photos and the square crop of the Hipstamatic and all these weird effects, toyful effects, and it's like, I would feel naked to go on a vacation to Ecuador without my bags of gear. I want to have everything with me. And he came back with this collection of doors, and it was just stunning. Each one of those was worth printing and hanging. It was incredible.
Yeah.
And
those kinds of constraints can really be a driver of a lot of creativity.
Right. So you restrict yourself to produce and expand more. It's like go in to expand. And it's very interesting.
No, well, you need to watch it though sometimes, because I used to carry a pretty heavy backpack around with me, trekking through cities to take photographs. And I was in Boston one day and I tripped over my own feet and broke my elbow, my left elbow in 11 places, largely because I had a 30-pound backpack. If I had just tripped over my own feet and cuffed my elbows or something like that, it would have been one thing. So I sort of try not to carry any more equipment than in a backpack than I have to anymore.
Yeah, I'm often kind of hiking up the side of some, kind of not cliffs so much, but like up rainforest, roots and everything all over the place. And I was doing it with the sling for a while. And once I was walking up these paths and I kept on falling because it was muddy, but I was off balance, off kilter because of this sling. So I started to wear a backpack on both shoulders, but I also try to carry a lot less gear. So I never pack out like, bunches of lenses and cameras anymore. It's usually pretty stripped back.
Well, that until you get into infrared photography.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are cool. I really appreciated all the depth you
Then
went
you're gonna
into.
travel with 2 or 3 camera bodies and 6
Yeah.
lenses and 2 bags, and it's like you can't have enough. You
Don't
need
forget a drone. Can bring a drone along too.
right. I never got into that, fortunately, but yeah.
Now, my wife was going to give me a drone for my birthday about 10 years ago. And I said, whatever you do, don't do that because that's the only thing I'll ever do. It sounds fascinating, but and the infrared stuff, I'm very intrigued by it. But again, I think I kind of would be spreading myself kind of thin with it. And I do have a couple of camera bodies I could get converted. So
But these days, one of the images I submitted uh, last week was from a recent trip to a neighbor island, and I carried everything I have with me. I had 2 bodies, whatever lenses, and my phone. And I was walking the forest, and I took the same image with the phone and with my cameras, the color, the D850 color, and a D800 in infrared, to have all the versions possible, and then compare the different conversions and just pick the best. And the phone won by far.
Hmm.
The most compelling black and white came out of the phone, and it was something that I did pretty much on the phone right there, and I could have shared it in Flickr right from location without the hassle of computer and processing and all of that. And I have similar experiences traveling the American Southwest a few years ago. Took lots of photos, and the only photos that I go back to every now and then and see are those in my phone, because they were easy and they're great. But of course, as an amateur, I don't do anything with them. I don't print them. I don't do murals or anything.
printing is a good thing to do. I mean, not that you have to do that, but you do learn a little
Yeah.
bit. And one good thing about printing is it's very forgiving. So you see some little boo-boos or something like that when you look at it on your screen, they're gone
Right.
on a print.
They're gone. Yeah.
And it's fun to see your stuff. You'd open up a package, you go, wow, and you pull it out of the
But
mailer.
also, to me, see, everything we're doing, sharing on a screen, online, and all of that, that is like Facebook or social media compared to real life, right? It's a virtual image of a photograph, but it's not the photograph. To me, the photograph is the tangible photograph is a print on art paper or hanging on a wall, something that we can grab and hold in our hands. That closes the circle and provides the full experience.
Yeah,
And
I agree with you with that. With
and
100%.
and the distance when you have a print, and you know this, right? When you go to Los Angeles to one of these photography galleries where they have all these originals from Ansel Adams and all these photographers, and you get one of these prints on your hands, and you just see the the thickness of the paper and the texture, and whether they chose to use a matte paper or a brilliant paper, or it's a whole different universe. It's a completely different thing. The image is the same image, but the photograph is not the same. So
It's an interesting question though, because in some respects that throws us back to the analog digital dynamic, in that, like, for a lot of folks, they will privilege a digital image much more over print. So the idea of a print, like, I totally get it, and I wish I had more wall space to show prints, but I don't. So I have a big digital frame that I also use for a lot of things.
Yeah.
But like, I think about like the recent camera that Pentax came out with, the Pentax 17, with the half frame exposures and everything, in portrait mode. Okay, it's a response to the price of digital, or of the price of film.
Yeah.
It doubles up the amount that you can take shots of. It keeps it in portrait because that's something a lot closer to what people are shooting on their phone. I would expect that most of us now interact with photography far more in digital screens than in print. And I can't see anything changing that And in some respects that makes maybe the physical print more valuable. It has a certain lifespan, depending on how long your inks will last and how much sun is on your print. But it will increasingly, and I think we see that now, people are going to be, kind of interacting with photography, and it is still photography, and it is still, a real image to the extent that anything digital is, fully on a screen. So I mean that I've heard similar kinds of debates around, let's say, books. So is an electronic text the same as a physical text? Well, it depends on what you value, and I personally love the fact that I don't have to buy magazines anymore to have physical magazines, and the digital magazines can be, well, actually magazines are kind of on their way out in some respects, but the medium of print itself is just one economy of photography. It's no surprise that photo books are getting more expensive. They're also becoming rarer. So, that's becoming a collector item as much as it is just kind of a continuing presentation of images. So we play with these things with media all the time. And I think it's been both good and bad that photography has moved in this way. I think it's without any question, most photos are now produced on phones. And the idea that people are taking so much or taking pictures so much more with phones maybe degrades some aspects of the skill, the art, but at the same time it probably enriches and attaches more people to the idea of creating pictures, for better or worse.
Yeah, that's the whole post photography thing where there's no really any photographers involved. It's just people taking pictures, snapshots and things. But one thing about prints, though, as much as I love prints, when I have to make one of our photo shows, I might have an image like, if I grab this one, like I created this image. It's kind of, anyway, it's a spider web photo on this. You can see how big this image is.
Yeah,
Cost me like $175
right.
at MPEX. I could have gotten it a little bit cheaper. I could have been a lot cheaper if I would have framed it myself and everything like that. But you can get a reasonably cheap big screen TV and hang on your wall, and you have a photo. It's like, I don't know, maybe that would be a good discussion about that. To me, that seems almost identical to a print.
Well, I think the confusion comes from putting everything in the same bag, and we're talking different things. It's a bicycle is not the same as a motorcycle. It's not the same as a car. It's not the same as a four-wheel drive truck or a Jeep.
Right.
There's different, and they're all transportation. They're all fun. They're all great, but they're all different, and you cannot replace one with the other fully. There's an overlap. You can go to the same places with a car and a motorcycle. There are places you can do with go with the motorcycle and not with the car, vice versa. And so it is not the same, and it goes all across. It's the same, film or digital, both. It's not film or digital. It's film and digital. Is it a digital screen or a print? No, it is not or. It is and, because it's different things. It depends on what you want. What space do you have? Do you really want pictures hanging on your wall or not? Maybe not. Do you have a budget for it? Maybe not. Digital is cheap, it's affordable. Everybody can do digital. Printing costs money. And then you spend all these years learning how to make your photos look good on the screen. And then when you print it, it looks like trash. All the colors are off, everything is done. Now you need to do all those adjustments again, and you need to start learning how to adjust for the printer. And sometimes those, as much as all these color calibration tools exist, there is always a factor of you need to know, you need to throw it off so much to compensate for what the printer is going to print, but it's not something that you can see. You just, and which is how color is used to print in the past, and I have friends, professional printers that are doing this here in Maui, and they work with artists for art reproduction, and they just put the file on Photoshop, and they just tweak the colors, and they veer into the magentas or the cyans, and they send it to the printer for a large print that is gonna cost maybe $50 to make. You don't want to waste all that money on a wrong print. And these guys, they have they just know how it needs to look on the screen for the colors to print right on the printer. And all that knowledge you cannot learn without years of experience. So printing is challenging. It's an art on itself. It's like developing film. It's a whole universe. And some people, they really cannot get to it. So it's not or, it's just and. It's an option that is out there for those who want to explore it. And technology is offering us digital, and that is awesome. To me, if 10 billion people are shooting photos with their phones versus 20 master photographers worldwide that are the reference of photography, well, I'd rather take the 20 million and forget about the masters, right? And because the masters, there's always going to be a place for the masters. And they're a source for inspiration, but they're already gone, and their job is done. It is what it is. There's no more from them. Everything new is going to come from the newer generations. So yes, just send those kids with a hipstamatic and see what they surprise us with.
Yeah.
That is awesome. AI is coming. Everybody's freaking out about AI. To me, AI is just another tool. What matter behind the AI, even if I was talking to my computer and say, hey, create an image of a landscape where the trees look like this and the sun look like that, and I want two birds flying this way, and I describe a scene, and the device creates it for me, and then I tweak it and say, okay, this is close but not quite right, and I start this interaction back and forth until I have what I want. That process, to me, it's no different than developing film. It is exactly the same. I am interacting with the media until I get the image that I imagine in my head, and I'm getting that result. As long as and the creativity is on me. The creativity is not in the machine. The machine is just producing what I described, what I want.
I would say that's a valid artistic form, but I would not call that photography. I think
No, it is not. So again, so that is another misconception. So we keep calling everything photography, and we keep insisting in photography this, photography that, and everybody seems to have their own definition of what photography should be. Well, photography is recording an image on a photosensitive medium. That's what photography is about. So image generation on a computer is not photography. You may get a photographic looking result, that's fine, but that is a computer generated image. Is there value in restricting ourselves to a photographic way of producing images? No, I don't think so. I think that the limitation belongs to the past, where the photographic process was the only way of producing an image. But technology is giving us today all sorts of ways of producing images. So what we're doing is producing images. Whether we use a photographic process or not is irrelevant. And if we're pleased with the photographic result, even if that image was not produced photographically, it shouldn't really matter to me. I don't think it matters. But that's me.
I don't think I don't think it has. I'd say, to me, what I enjoy is actually capturing something in the real world, like,
Right.
outside or with a landscape, or taking a picture of an object inside of a studio or something like that. That's, to me, that's what photography is. If that part of the reality is gone, then it's just digital painting, which is totally valid too, but it's not photography. It can be photorealistic,
Correct. Yeah. That's what we're
but it's
talking about.
not the photography process.
There's a really interesting article in Lens Culture from about a year ago that really caught my attention. So I put a link into the chat. And I mean, it's fascinating. I was going to comment earlier. There's an essay from the 30s, Walter Benjamin, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, or its mechanical reproducibility, that looks at the transition from technology from artistic to mechanical reproduction, and then the resulting change in the notion of value, the change of authenticity and such. And he talks specifically about the development of photography and cinematography, and then the way it changes the artistic and creative process. And a lot of that same kind of sensibility is at play today with the transitions that we're experiencing. AI is really fascinating too. I think like I've been, really amazed at some of the works that I see. And I, for the very first time, and it was kind of at your prompting, Teddy, when you were talking about the geometry tools in Photoshop and how you can use generate fill. So I did that on a picture the other day and went, oh my God, because I was usually constrained where I've straightened something, but I had this white space. So suddenly I created something that wasn't there using generative AI. And that was an interesting moment to think about in terms of, well, how far do you go with that? But one piece of it that I'm still not kind of settled on is that the capability of the tool to generate that image has a lot of, at the moment, a real deep problematic set of ethical concerns, because a lot of the fact that it can do that is because it scraped our images and images of a lot of people. And so its capabilities have been built upon a lot of stolen IP. And I'm in a post-secondary context. So as we're moving more into positioning generative AI tools for our students and our faculty, we're being prompted to get to a place where the large language models we use need to be audited so that we have some kind of awareness of how they've been trained up and whether or not they've been trained up by basically like I think it was Google that just kind of fed a whole bunch of writers' work in without any permission whatsoever, or is it something that's been done a little bit more transparently in terms of where are the sources of this? Now, any artistic field like photography has long depended upon people copying and kind of working with other people's work. I mean, that's kind of how a lot of creative processes happen, but this is, I can say, well, give me a picture that looks like this person's style, and it will do that because it's basically, been trained in part to be able to do that. So that's where it becomes quite interesting, but it's extremely powerful. There's no question that it's creative. But I think it's good that people are kind of taking moments to think about when they use it. But this article I thought was really interesting in terms of the way in which this photographer who used to stage these kind of really interesting shots now is using AI to do things that are really creative and interesting and a bit surreal and quite edgy.
They're just tools. They're just tools to means to an end. And
I would like
a lot of,
go ahead.
Oh,
no, I was
okay.
just going to say, I would like for AI to just clean up stuff. Like, oh, there's a halo around this. Please remove the halo, or something like that. Instead of just creating something from whole cloth.
Yeah, or make a mask for these and create a layer for that. Yeah, and that is the approach. I use Capture One for raw processing, and that is the approach of Capture One. Capture One is just all the AI is used to refine a mask or to do a selection. There's no generation of a scene. There's no generative field on Capture One. I don't think they're going to go in that route. They might. I find all these what the models are using to build the source material for generative AI, all these images that are our images, and all it taps into copyright. it taps into ownership. That is a conversation about money. It's not a conversation about photography. It's not a conversation about art. And I refuse to have it because I don't want money to get in the way of creation and inspiration. I don't want money to be a limiting factor for the expansion of technology, and because technology brings change and growth to societies. I can care less. And I also find it pointless. I can, and you can, Teddy, anyone with an average knowledge of digital manipulation, we can download any photograph from any website on the internet of any size, and we can enlarge it, we can clean it, we can remove a watermark, we can improve it, and we can make it, bring it to a point where we can print it in 16 by 20 or 8 by 10 and hang it on our wall. And then we don't need to purchase that image from the photographer. We can do that any day, any time, and it takes us maybe 15 minutes to do. So there is no protection. All that is an illusion, defending an illusion of copyright and rights and protection that I find pointless. Just let go of all of that. You know, all these images that are available on the internet for people to see, well, we're making them available. We're just giving them away, and that's fine. You know, I have learned a lot from images given to me by others. You know, I collected them, I studied them, I learned, and this is what is allowing me today to produce my own images. It's an exchange. It's part of an exchange. So we are contributing to the development of these tools that come back to us, so we can do this AI selecting of a mask. Topaz Labs, now they have, with the gigapixel, the enlarging app, now they have a button that you press that says restore faces on details. So when you have a tiny photo of a portrait and you enlarge it, then the face is all blurry and there's no much detail. And you press the button and it gives you the face with full detail again. Well, what it's doing is just replacing the eyes with somebody else's eyes, the nose with somebody else's nose. And it recomposes, it gives you a face that is very close to the person's face, to the original, but it's not the original, it's not the same.
No.
And if this is a photo that you're restoring of an old family member, somebody that you know and you remember, you're going to notice the differences. It's not the same person. So it's not fixing your image, it is replacing your image with a sharper version of somebody else's. And that is okay for most purposes. It may not be what you're trying to do. And so we have to take things for what they are instead of trying to put everything on the same bag and call everything photography, everything truthful. Just let go, let it be, join the flow.
Well, I think eventually, and I like to say, it sounds like I'm just making a joke, a robot with a camera head, that the robot, the computer algorithms inside makes the same decision any photographer would make, looking at the light, the time of day, what the season's going to be, and so forth. Once that happens, if you can buy this robot, anybody can, those robots will be out taking these spectacular photographs that are unique to them. Like,
so you have the rules of photography. You have the rules of thirds, the rules of composition, standards about noise. Okay, those are going to make the algorithms that those robots are going to produce, right? So the robot is going to give you an image that is following within the limitations of the rules of thirds, this and this and that. Is going to be acceptable by the standards. It will never be outstanding, because in general, the artistic interpretations that stand out are those that break the rules, that get out of the rules. If you stick to the rules, you're going to be average. You're not going to stand out. That is my feeling.
But I think if you could
There's
get a
always-
sentient creature, like a sentient AI, that could go out and make these decisions just like Ansel Adams would, or any other great photographer, not even to copy it, but have their own sensibilities. And
it would need to have, so the sophistication of the computing power, the AI would need to have this level of sophistication capable of creativity, of creative
that's
thinking.
what intelligence is. I mean, I think that's
Right.
why I think the AI right now is a marketing term to try to add flash to something. People used to talk about smart computing. Smart computing is an old hat, old hat. So now
Right.
AI, and I think it is incredible. All these advances are there, and it seems like amazing. But I don't really believe that's AI yet.
No, it's not intelligent. So what they call intelligence in
Yeah.
terms of algorithms is not human intelligence.
Yeah, it's just pattern. It's pattern recognition and it's encodings.
Yeah.
What it is trial and error. So if you want to hit a nail with a hammer, well, you start moving the hammer this way, eventually you're going to hit it. It's all trial and error and adjusting. So, okay, I didn't hit it, I need to go to the right. So it's trial, error, correction. Try again, error, correct. And what happens, the speed is tremendous these days. It's 10 billion times a microsecond. I don't know. It's just ridiculous. It's unimaginable. So they can speed up all this process so fast that within seconds you get a result. But that result was not an intelligent decision. It was just a process of elimination of failures until you get it.
Well, you were talking about, you were a fan of Isaac Asimov. Of course, there's iRobot and the laws of robotics and the positronic brain and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's what the future eventually will be. I don't think it's going to happen next year or 5 years from now, but maybe 10 years from now, there's going to be an actually sentient computing process that can do exactly the same thing humans do. And
That is an
artistic
interesting
decisions.
conversation, and yeah, so we're getting into theoretical
Science
science, right? No, but
That's
it
a
is
philosophy thrown in.
Yeah.
I think it's the same discussion about black and white photography and color photography. When we had only black and white, photographers say, well, we stick to black and white. We don't go to color.
Well, we're getting up to the last part. I'm going to limit these to 2 hours. And one thing I want to ask, Jeff, your telescope, your red telescope.
Oh, yeah, that's
Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, cool! Look at that.
well, actually, that's one of the smallest ones. I've got my largest telescope is a 15-inch Dobsonian.
Oh,
Okay.
So when you look at Andromeda through that, you can see a lot of detail. But yeah, if you think photography as a hobby can be expensive, just go look at the telescope someday. Beautiful optics. So yeah, it's a fun hobby. But this is just a little one that I used to use with my son because a little kid can hold it in his or her lap, and it's a wide field view of. It's a 4-inch. Basically, it's a 4-inch reflector. So
I'm going to show you something, guys, if I can find it.
but it's interesting. So I tried to get into, and I bought the gear and started working at astrophotography. And we have a couple astrophotographers in the weekly group, and who are really good. But I found that it wasn't photography, it wasn't astronomy, and I didn't take to it because I didn't like spending my time under a nice little okay, there you go, under the sky, staring at a screen, trying to get things going. So I have to figure out my way into that.
So this is an old Nikon mount,
Mhm.
Tamron zoom lens. It's a 200 to 500.
Oh,
You can buy these for $200 on eBay. And this is a little Nikon. They call it lens to scope adapter.
Yeah, I've seen
They
those.
don't make them anymore, but you can find them for $100 or $200. And you mount these. You mount the lens to this like you would mount it to your camera.
Yep. And now you have a little refractor.
that's cool.
You have a telescope, and I have an adapter that grabs from here, and I can mount my cell phone, and I can
Oh,
photograph.
wow. Yeah.
Like, I mean,
I've seen people do that with microscopes.
Yeah.
right.
Do you have a tracking mount? Because that's the next step.
No,
Yeah.
that is the
Yeah.
next step, and I don't know if I'm going to, because the tracking mount is about $500-600.
Mhm.
And for that money, now they're selling all these digital telescopes that have a tiny 2-megapixel camera, but they do the tracking, they do everything automatically, and they simplify everything tremendously. So I might do that instead. I might just spend $500, get one of those things, and put it on the roof and let it just shoot all night, and then
Yeah.
you can just stitch, like fuse together all these, I don't know, thousands of images and get clear detail. It's amazing.
So the earlier conversation we had about digital and analog, it plays out in the astronomy community. So I would say I'm more of a visual observer than an astrophotographer, and quite often there's a bit of hostility between those two groups.
Right.
And the difference is I want the photons to hit my eyes rather than staring at a screen.
I see.
Recently, a newish development now is, so they're basically taking it. This is too small, but this is a telescope eyepiece, but
Right.
they're now building a full camera unit and a computer inside of an eyepiece, so that basically it becomes a digital lens for you, and then you hook it up to a tablet or a screen, and within the eyepiece itself, it handles all the integration of the like 10-second, 20-second exposures. And so all you need to do is put one of these on a telescope that's on a tracking mount or not, and you will be able to start to do astrophotography. So one eyepiece, the last one I saw, or the more recent one I saw, it's about $3,000 just for the eyepiece.
Right.
Oh,
But it means that you've basically got pretty amazing ability to see things from the middle of a bright sky like you would have here in the city.
Yeah, but they're dedicated digital cameras. You have a full sensor.
You don't even need the camera. The eyepiece is itself a camera.
Correct.
It's got a sensor in it.
Around. Yeah, I've seen them, but it is a full sensor digital camera. The eyepiece itself. Is that what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. They've now built the camera into the eyepiece.
Inside, yeah, and it has a fan built in.
So I'm not talking about I'm not talking about like an astrophotography camera. I'm talking about now, it's when you look in the lens, you're looking through a viewfinder rather than an optical lens. So the image presented to you is a digital one, just like it would be in the back of your camera.
Okay.
And you can pull the digital feed off and you can display it.
that's like something that might have came out of JPL, Jet Propulsion Lab. I mean, is that how probes work,
Yeah, but I mean, this whole conversation around analog and digital, photons and digital, like it's playing out, and this capability now to have a tiny little 4-inch scope that basically you can see the Horse Nebula from the middle of Vancouver, which is amazing.
Okay, guys, I'm going to shut things off. I'm going to record. We got to shut off the meeting.
We covered a lot in this conversation.
It was fun.
we did.
This is great, guys. Thank you for
Astro now.
Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing next week. The link should be the same. So, but I'm going to post a new link on next Saturday. So, anyway.
All right. Enjoy the week.
It was great to see you.
Nice to chat.
Yeah.
See you
Bye,
later.
guys.
Thank you.